After winning the silver medal at the Asian Team Championships in 2021, India's top squash player Ramit Tandon is now aiming to win medals at the Asian and Commonwealth Games. Ramit, who belongs to Kolkata, has a current world ranking of 47. He turned pro by the end of 2017 and he has won 4 PSA Tour titles since then. He is an Asian Games Bronze Medalist. In an exclusive chat with nnis Sports, Ramit said he wants to strike gold in the big events this year. Winning silver medal at the Asian Team Championships 2021.
Yeah, so it was definitely a good result for us. Obviously, at the same time, losing in the final, I always believe hurts a little more than losing in the earlier rounds in a certain way, because you're so close to kind of winning the gold. But I think, you see, the main goal for most of the countries is the Asian Games. And something like the Asian teams is like a test for us prior to the Asian Games. And the event was a challenging event. We had Pakistan in our half, which is it's a legendary team. They have a dynasty of squash, so they're always tough. And then we had Hong Kong in the semifinals. And to come through against those teams is kind of good for India as a squash playing nation. And overall, I was proud. I was proud of the way we played, because circumstances are a little different now. We were stuck in Malaysia for like a long time in the bio bubble, and playing Malaysia in Malaysia is always harder than playing them anywhere else. So all put together, I think I was proud of the way we fought, but obviously a little disappointed that it didn't go our way.
2022, the big year, Commonwealth Games, Asian Games, and many more international competitions. How are the preparations going on?
I mean, the preparation, obviously, we are putting our best foot forward. It is a very important year for squash, since squash isn't in the Olympics. For us, the Asians and the Commonwealth are the two biggest events. So definitely, in terms of like support from the government, our federation, all the players involved, we are going to put our best foot forward. In terms of the preparation, things are different. I mean, with lockdowns, with the current situation that we all are in, it's always harder now to kind of plan and figure things out, because things are constantly changing, whether it's a tournament schedule, whether it's travel, or whether it's, you never know when some city kind of locks down sporting facilities, they lock down gyms. So in terms of planning, it has been a little difficult. It has been a little hectic, because it's actually, to be honest, it's very difficult to have a certain plan. We have to be very flexible, and we got to play it like month by month to see which tournaments are still on the calendar, which are being moved, and in terms of preparing training blocks and stuff, it's getting a little hard. But at the same time, I think the circumstances are the same for everyone. So we definitely are trying our best to work around it and kind of figure out what the best situation would be for us as athletes.
How difficult were the lockdown days for you?
It is very difficult to be very, very honest. There is, I mean, in an athlete's life, even like 1 week of not playing puts you back by 3 or 4 weeks, right? Because see, we go through cycle of training, and once you're in the cycle of training, even 3 or 4 days, if you take off, you kind of go back to square one. So definitely the lockdowns has been a little challenging. Like what I understand, like I have friends who are my competitors as well. When we meet for tournaments and stuff, like for the UK, for example, and the Middle East and stuff, for athletes, there's an exemption, right? So even in the lockdowns, they have permission to go and train, and it's considered work for them. In India, obviously, that hasn't been the case. In certain situations in the lockdown, I've gone through 8 weeks, 12 weeks of not seeing the squash court, or going to a gym and just trying to do things at home, which does make it a little difficult. But I guess we all are going through a difficult phase. So we just have to deal with the challenge.
How long were you away from the squash court? How did it feel in your first few sessions post-lockdown?
So in lockdowns, there were multiple in India. There were 2 major lockdowns. So the first one was around like close to 3 months, if I'm not wrong. So I was actually in the US, and I was the last flight back into India from the US. So when I arrived, I think the next day, Prime Minister kind of announced national-wide lockdown. So the first half of the lockdown wasn't too bad because the rest was welcome. We were kind of towards the end of the season, and I was happy to be home, and I was happy to spend some time with the family because we do travel a lot. But after a few weeks, I started to realize that this is going on and on. There's no end to this, and obviously, then panic struck, and then we had to kind of find ways to do some home training. So I had to work closely with like my fitness coach, whose name is Anwar Wahab, and then we had to kind of figure out some kind of stuff that I could do at home. But obviously, it never replicates what you can do in the gym or on the squash court. So we tried our best. But obviously, when I got back to the court after like 3 months, it was difficult. Uh, we had to plan things, not only difficult from a training point of view on the court, but even from a planning point of view. We had to kind of figure out what would the right strategy be to kind of get back. Because since the age of 6, that's when I started playing squash. I'd never taken such a long break from the sport. The maximum I had taken was around a month, probably during my board exams. And that too, when I had time in between the exams, I would get 1 or 2 squash sessions in. So this was something very foreign, not only for me, but for my coaches and for everyone. So the first few sessions was definitely very difficult. I remember like my first session, I held the racket after like 3.5 months, and post the session, I had blisters all over my fingers. So I had to take another 3 days off because I couldn't hold the racket after that. So I mean that's an example of how challenging it was to come back after the first lockdown. The second lockdown that came in later on during the second wave, I feel I was a little more prepared. I kept, even though there was no access to the squash court, I kept gripping my racket to make sure I don't have the blister problem once I do get back to the court. So there was the small adjustments I made, which kind of helped me. But we had the World Championships in Chicago, and there was still a lockdown in India. So I actually had to leave for the tournament. I had to leave for the US without actually practicing in India. So I left a little early, like 2 or 3 weeks before the tournament, and I started my training there, which obviously is not ideal for preparation for any athlete for any tournament, leave alone it being the World Championship. But yeah, I mean, coming back from like in an athlete's life, even 2 or 3 days of rest, it puts you behind by like a few weeks. So when we talk about taking a few weeks or a few months off, you can just imagine how difficult it is to kind of make a comeback after that.
Tell us about your journey and how did you get into squash and make it a career in a cricket fanatic country?
I mean, I actually started playing cricket. So I actually love following cricket. And I have played a bit of youth ball cricket as well as a kid growing up. I think cricket was my first sport that I got into. I used to do a bit of swimming when I was like 5, 6 years old. And I got into cricket. I mean, cricket being a religion in India, it's not surprising that it was the first sport I got into. But eventually, I moved into squash slowly. And I think a bit of the hand-eye coordination from cricket did help me with my squash. My dad actually used to play. So as most kids do, you want to follow in the footsteps of your father. And, I would follow him around. He would go to the club here in Calcutta, and I would just kind of follow him around and see him play. And then kind of once he finishes playing, I would take his racket and try to emulate what he was doing on court. So I think that's where, I started getting into the sport. It just started with a fascination of trying to be like him. And then slowly and steadily, from like playing 5, 7 minutes after he finished playing, gradually I started playing 15, 20 minutes. Then my parents thought maybe I should just sign up for some lessons over there. So gradually, I think I kind of moved into squash because my dad was into it. Yeah.
Who is your favorite cricketer?
That's a tough question, because we have so many cricketing heroes in India. It gets very difficult to pick and choose. As a kid growing up, it's always been Sachin. I actually went down to the Eden Gardens to watch him when I was like 7 or 8 years old. It was India versus Pakistan, the test match. And I remember I think he came out to bat on the second day. So I went in the first day and Sachin didn't come out to bat. So I was like thoroughly disappointed. And then I went the second day and then he did come out to bat. And he got bowled, I think, to Shoaib Akhtar on the first ball. So literally I didn't see him hit the ball. And I was tearing up, because I saw him walk out and then walk back to the pavilion. So it was like very emotional for me. But it used to be Sachin. And now I would say it was Dhoni for a bit. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the way he led Team India, and his, as an athlete, I do respect his mindset and temperament a lot, how cool he is under pressure. And then obviously, off late, Virat, what he's been doing with cricket in India, it's not easy to fill in those big shoes, right? Like Sachin as a batsman, what he's done. To be even compared to him is kind of a big achievement. And then as a captain, to follow like someone as great as MS Dhoni is not an easy task. So you kind of got to respect his courage and boldness to kind of step into those shoes and even attempt to try to come close to achieving what these guys have. So I think in modern day cricket, probably Virat. But I mean, India has so many amazing cricketers, so it's definitely hard to
True.
pick and choose.